On my 25th birthday, my mother stood up and said something that would haunt me forever. What happened next changed everything I thought I knew about family and self-worth. If you're ready for a story that will make you question everything about belonging, hit that like button and subscribe for more. I thought turning 25 would be different. I had planned this birthday party for weeks, carefully selecting the venue, the guest list, even the playlist that would carry us through the evening. The small restaurant in downtown Portland felt perfect, intimate enough for meaningful conversations, but spacious enough for the 30 people I had invited. Family, college friends, co-workers from the marketing firm where I had been steadily climbing the ladder for 3 years. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. The decorations were tasteful, the food was delicious, and people were actually having fun. I watched from across the room as my college roommate Sarah laughed with my cousin Jake, and my work mentor Linda chatted animatedly with my father about his recent retirement. For once, it felt like all the different pieces of my life were fitting together harmoniously. My mother had been unusually quiet throughout the evening, nursing her wine and offering polite smiles when people approached her. I should have recognized the signs. Growing up, I had learned to read her moods like weather patterns, the subtle shift in her posture, the way she held her mouth when she was building up to something. But I was too caught up in the joy of the moment, too relieved that everything was going smoothly. As we gathered around the table for the cake cutting, I felt genuinely happy. My father raised his glass for a toast, and I expected the usual warm words about watching me grow into the woman I had become. Instead, my mother suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that cut through the conversations like a knife. "Before we do this," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone I knew meant trouble, "I think everyone should know who Natalie really is." The room fell silent. I felt my smile freeze on my face as every eye in the restaurant turned toward us. My heart started beating so fast I could hear it in my ears. "This is the daughter who has disappointed me every single day of her life," she continued, her words precise and deliberate. "The one who chose a frivolous career instead of becoming a doctor like we planned. The one who moved 3,000 miles away just to spite us. The one who calls maybe once a month and never visits unless she wants something." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The faces around me blurred as I felt 25 years of criticism and conditional love crystallize into this one horrific moment. Some people looked away in embarrassment, others stared in shock. My father reached for my mother's arm, whispering urgently for her to stop. But she shook him off. "You all think she's so successful, so independent," she laughed bitterly. "But I raised her, and I know better. She's selfish, ungrateful, and she embarrasses this family every single day with her choices." The cake sat between us, untouched, its cheerful candles flickering in the heavy silence. I felt like I was watching this happen to someone else, like I was floating above the scene, observing this public execution of my character from a safe distance. But the burning in my chest, the way my hands were shaking, the taste of copper in my mouth, these sensations anchored me firmly in the reality of the moment. Sarah was the first to move. She stood up quietly, walked over to where I was frozen, and put her arm around my shoulders. "Come on," she whispered. "Let's get some air." I let her guide me outside, my legs moving automatically while my mind tried to process what had just happened. The cool Portland evening felt like a slap after the warmth of the restaurant. I could hear the murmur of confused voices behind us, the sound of chairs scraping as people probably gathered their things to leave early. "Nat," Sarah said gently, turning me to face her. "Look at me." I tried to focus on her face, but everything felt unstable, like the ground beneath my feet might give way at any moment. "Did that really just happen?" I asked, my voice coming out as barely a whisper. "Unfortunately, yes," she said, pulling me into a hug. "But it says everything about her, and nothing about you. You know that, right?" I wanted to believe her, but my mother's words were already burrowing deep into my mind, finding all the places where my own self-doubt lived and making themselves at home. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was selfish for moving to Portland instead of staying in Ohio near them. Maybe my career in marketing was frivolous compared to the medical degree they had always wanted me to pursue. Over the next hour, people trickled out of the restaurant, offering awkward hugs and mumbled apologies. Some promised to call later, others just escaped as quickly as possible, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama they had witnessed. My father came out eventually, his face pale and apologetic. "She's been drinking more than usual," he said quietly, as if that explained or excused what had happened. "You know how she gets when she's had too much wine." But I did know how she got, and that was exactly the problem. This wasn't the wine talking. This was years of resentment and disappointment finally finding their voice. The alcohol had just removed the filter that usually kept her criticism private, contained within our family walls where it could slowly poison my confidence without witnesses. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the unopened birthday gifts people had brought, feeling more alone than I had ever felt in my life. The silence was deafening after the chaos of the evening. I kept replaying the moment, wondering if there was something I could have said or done differently, some way I could have prevented this public humiliation. But as the hours passed and the shock began to wear off, something else started to emerge underneath the hurt and embarrassment. For the first time in my life, I had seen my mother's criticism for what it really was. Not truth, but her own disappointment and control issues projected onto me. The very public nature of her attack had somehow made it impossible to internalize her words the way I usually did. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the messages that had been coming in all evening. Sarah, checking on me every hour. Linda from work, saying she was proud of who I had become regardless of what anyone else thought. My cousin Jake, apologizing for his mother's behavior and telling me I deserved better. Even some coworkers I barely knew outside the office had reached out, offering support and expressing their shock at what they had witnessed. For 25 years, I had been living my life trying to earn my mother's approval, making decisions based on what I thought would finally make her proud of me. But sitting there, surrounded by messages from people who actually saw and valued who I was, I realized something important. I had been seeking validation from the wrong person all along. The Monday morning after my birthday felt like stepping into an alternate universe. I sat at my desk at Morrison Marketing, staring at my computer screen without really seeing it, my mind still replaying the events of Saturday night on an endless loop. The weekend had passed in a blur of phone calls from concerned friends, ignored voicemails from my father, and long walks through the Portland streets trying to make sense of what had happened. Linda knocked on my office door around 10, holding 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of expression that meant she was about to have a serious conversation whether I wanted one or not. "How are you holding up?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. Linda had been at the party. She had witnessed the whole thing, had seen my mother systematically dismantle me in front of everyone I cared about. The thought made my cheeks burn with fresh embarrassment. "I'm fine," I said automatically, then caught her skeptical look. "Okay, I'm not fine. I'm mortified. I keep thinking about everyone who was there, what they must think of me now. What they think of you." Linda set down her coffee and leaned forward. "Natalie, everyone there was appalled by your mother's behavior, not judging you for it. If anything, it made people respect you more. How could it possibly make people respect me more? You saw me just standing there like an idiot, letting her tear me apart in public." "I saw you handle an impossible situation with grace," Linda said firmly. "You didn't fight back, didn't make a scene, didn't escalate the drama. You took the high road when someone who should love and protect you decided to attack you in the most hurtful way possible. I had never thought of it that way. In my mind, I had been weak, frozen, unable to defend myself. But Linda's perspective offered a different interpretation of events. The question is," Linda continued, "what are you going to do now?" I stared at her, not understanding. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you going to let this define you? Are you going to internalize her words and shrink back into yourself? Or are you going to use this as an opportunity to figure out who you really are when you're not trying to please someone who can't be pleased?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and fear in equal measure. I had spent so many years trying to be the daughter my mother wanted that I wasn't sure I knew who I was underneath all those expectations. I don't even know where to start, I admitted. Start with what you love, Linda said. What makes you happy? What gets you excited? What would you do with your life if you knew no one would judge you for it? The questions felt foreign, almost dangerous. For so long, my choices had been filtered through the lens of what would gain approval, or at least minimize criticism. The idea of making decisions based purely on what I wanted felt both thrilling and terrifying. That afternoon, I found myself thinking about college, about the classes that had excited me, the projects that had kept me up all night not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I remembered the creative writing courses I had taken as electives, how alive I had felt when crafting stories and exploring different perspectives. I thought about the marketing campaigns I was most proud of at work, the ones where I had pushed for creative, unconventional approaches that had paid off. After work, instead of going straight home to my empty apartment, I stopped at Powell's Books downtown. I wandered through the aisles, running my fingers along book spines, remembering how much I used to love reading before I convinced myself it was a waste of time that could be better spent on more practical pursuits. In the career section, I found myself picking up books about entrepreneurship, about people who had left traditional paths to build something meaningful for themselves. I bought 3 books and a coffee, then sat in the little cafe area reading until they closed. That night, I called Sarah. "I've been thinking about what happened," I said, curled up on my couch with one of the books open beside me. "And I think maybe it was a gift." "A gift?" Sarah's voice was carefully neutral. "Not the way it happened," I clarified quickly. "That was horrible and humiliating and probably traumatic in ways I haven't fully processed yet. But the clarity it gave me, that was a gift. For the first time in my life, I saw exactly what I was dealing with. There was no way to rationalize it or make excuses. It was just cruel, and it helped me understand that I've been trying to win a game that was rigged from the start." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "So what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to do it for me, not for anyone else." Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into this new project of self-discovery, with the same intensity I had once applied to seeking my mother's approval. I started journaling, really examining my thoughts and feelings without the filter of what I thought I should think or feel. I signed up for a creative writing class at Portland Community College that met on Thursday evenings. I began reading voraciously again, everything from memoirs to business books to fiction that transported me to different worlds. The writing class was revelation. Sitting in that circle of strangers every week, sharing pieces of ourselves through our stories, I felt more authentic than I had in years. The instructor, Marcus, was a published author who treated everyone's work with respect and thoughtful criticism. For the first time since college, I was in an environment where creativity was valued over conformity. My mother called twice during this period. Both times, I let it go to voicemail. Both times, she left messages that started with half-hearted apologies but quickly devolved into justifications for her behavior and subtle criticisms of my overreaction. I deleted both messages without calling back. My father called too, trying to play peacemaker as he always did. "She's sorry," he said. "She knows she went too far. She wants to make things right." "Dad," I said gently, "if she wants to make things right, she can call me herself and offer a real apology. Not an explanation, not a justification. An apology that acknowledges the harm she caused and shows she understands why it was wrong." "You know she's not good at that kind of thing," he said, falling back on the familiar pattern of making excuses for her behavior. "Then maybe it's time she learned," I replied. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I felt proud of myself for setting a boundary instead of just accepting that this was how our family worked. Maybe it was how our family had always worked, but that didn't mean it had to continue working that way. 3 months after my birthday disaster, I was sitting in a coffee shop in the Alberta district, working on a short story for my writing class, when a woman at the next table leaned over. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I couldn't help overhearing your phone call." Are you talking about starting a freelance marketing business? I looked up, startled. I had just finished a conversation with Sarah about the idea that had been percolating in my mind for weeks, the possibility of leaving Morrison Marketing to start my own consultancy, focusing on helping small businesses tell their stories authentically. I am, I said cautiously. Why do you ask? I'm Jenna, she said, extending her hand. I own a small bakery in Selwood, and I've been struggling with my marketing. Everything feels so generic and corporate, and that's not who we are at all. When I heard you talking about authentic storytelling, it was like you were describing exactly what I need. That chance encounter led to my first freelance client. Working with Jenna's bakery, Sweet Provisions, reminded me why I had fallen in love with marketing in the first place. Instead of selling products, we were sharing stories. The story of how Jenna had learned to bake from her grandmother, how she sourced ingredients from local farms, how her shop had become a gathering place for the neighborhood. The campaign we developed together was unlike anything I had ever created at Morrison. It was personal, warm, and completely authentic to who Jenna was and what her business represented. When it launched, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Customers started coming in specifically because they connected with the story we had told. You get it, Jenna said when we met to review the results a month later. You understand that marketing isn't about tricking people into buying things. It's about connecting with people who already want what you have to offer. Nye. That insight became the foundation of my business philosophy. Over the next few months, word spread, and I found myself working with a diverse group of small business owners who had felt frustrated by traditional marketing approaches. A yoga instructor who wanted to reach people dealing with anxiety and depression. A bookstore owner who was passionate about promoting diverse voices in literature. A coffee roaster who was committed to fair trade practices. Each project taught me something new about myself and about what I was capable of when I stopped trying to fit into someone else's vision of success. I was working longer hours than I ever had at Morrison, but I woke up excited about my day instead of dreading it. My writing class had become a sanctuary. Every Thursday evening, I sat with the same group of people, an accountant working on a novel, a retired teacher writing memoirs, a college student experimenting with poetry, a nurse crafting short stories about her experiences in healthcare. We came from completely different backgrounds, but we shared something important: the courage to be vulnerable, to put our authentic selves on paper and share them with others. Marcus had encouraged me to submit one of my stories to a local literary magazine. The piece was about a woman who discovers that the family she had been trying to please her entire life never really knew her at all. It was deeply personal, inspired by my own experiences but transformed into fiction that explored the universal themes of identity and belonging. When the acceptance email arrived, I stared at it for a full 5 minutes before it sank in. My story would be published. Someone else had read my words and thought they were worth sharing with the world. I called Linda first, then Sarah, then my writing class group chat. The excitement and pride I felt was unlike anything I had experienced before. It was purely my own, not dependent on anyone else's approval or recognition. That evening, I was riding the high of the publication news when my phone rang. My father's name appeared on the screen, and something in me decided to answer. "Natalie," he said, his voice warm with genuine enthusiasm. "I just saw the announcement about your story being published. That's incredible, honey. I'm so proud of you." I was quiet for a moment, surprised by how much his words meant to me. "Thank you, Dad. That means a lot. I've been following your business too," he continued. "Your website, the client testimonials, it's impressive what you've built. I never really understood marketing before, but seeing how you help people tell their stories, I get it now. It's important work." We talked for almost an hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. He told me about his retirement projects, his volunteer work at the local library, how he had started reading more fiction and thinking about taking a photography class. I told him about my clients, my writing, how different my life felt now that I was making decisions based on what felt right to me rather than what I thought others expected. Near the end of the conversation, he brought up my mother. "She asks about you," he said carefully. She reads your website, you know. She's proud of what you've accomplished, even if she doesn't know how to say it. Dad, I said gently, I need you to understand something. I'm not angry with her anymore. I'm not holding a grudge or trying to punish her. But I can't have her in my life if she's going to treat me the way she did at my birthday party. If she wants a relationship with me, she needs to acknowledge what she did and show me that she's willing to change. She's stubborn, he said with a sigh. She has a hard time admitting when she's wrong. I know, I said, but that's her choice to make. I can't force her to change, and I can't keep sacrificing my well-being hoping that she will. After we hung up, I sat on my couch looking out at the city lights, feeling a complex mix of emotions. The conversation with my father had been healing in ways I hadn't expected. It reminded me that not all my family relationships were toxic, that it was possible to maintain connections with people who genuinely supported me while still protecting myself from those who didn't. 6 months after my birthday, I was officially self-employed, working with 12 regular clients and building a reputation for marketing that focused on authentic storytelling. My story had been published, and I was working on several new pieces. I had a community of fellow writers who knew and supported my creative work. I was dating someone I had met at a networking event, a documentary filmmaker named David who shared my passion for authentic storytelling and who made me laugh until my sides hurt. Most importantly, I had learned to trust my own judgment about what constituted a life worth living. I measured success by how fulfilled I felt at the end of each day, by the quality of my relationships, by whether I was growing as a person and contributing something meaningful to the world. It wasn't the life my mother had envisioned for me, but it was undeniably mine. A year and a half after my 25th birthday, I received a letter in my mailbox that made my hands shake. The return address was my mother's handwriting, but instead of the usual birthday or holiday card, this was a thick envelope with my name written in careful script. I set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it for 3 days before I found the courage to open it. The letter was 4 pages long, handwritten on the cream-colored stationery my mother had always used for important correspondence. Her handwriting was smaller than usual, more careful, as if she had written and rewritten each sentence multiple times. Dear Natalie, it began. I have started this letter dozens of times over the past year, never finding the right words to say what needs to be said. I have been going to therapy, something I never thought I would do. But your father insisted after what happened at your birthday party. Dr. Martinez has helped me understand some things about myself that are difficult to face. I had to stop reading and pour myself a cup of tea before I could continue. The idea of my mother in therapy was so foreign that I couldn't quite picture it. The letter continued, What I did at your party was cruel and unforgivable. I humiliated you in front of people you care about, and I used your special day as a platform for my own disappointment and anger. There is no excuse for that behavior, and I am not writing to offer excuses. I am writing to apologize and to try to explain, not to justify, but to help you understand where my words came from. She went on to describe her own childhood, growing up with parents who had immigrated from Ireland with dreams of prosperity and security that they had sacrificed everything to achieve. She wrote about the pressure she had felt to succeed, to prove that her family's sacrifices had been worthwhile, and how she had unconsciously passed that pressure on to me. I realized through therapy that I was trying to live vicariously through your accomplishments, she wrote. When you chose a different path than the one I had envisioned, I took it as a personal failure. I see now how unfair and damaging that was. You were never responsible for validating my choices or fulfilling my unrealized dreams. The most surprising part of the letter came near the end. I have been following your business and your writing. I read your published story, and I was amazed by your talent and your courage in sharing something so personal. I see now that you have built exactly the kind of life that brings meaning and fulfillment, and I am ashamed that I was too blind to see it before. I am proud of who you have become, and I am sorry it took me so long to say so. She closed by saying she understood if I needed more time or if I decided I didn't want a relationship with her at all. She promised that if I was willing to try again, she would continue working with her therapist, and would respect whatever boundaries I needed to set. I cried after reading the letter, not from sadness, but from a complicated relief I hadn't expected to feel. This was the acknowledgement I had needed, the recognition that what had happened was wrong and that the responsibility for repairing our relationship couldn't rest solely on my shoulders. I waited a week before responding, using that time to think carefully about what I wanted and what I was ready for. When I finally wrote back, I kept my letter brief but honest. "Thank you for your letter and for taking the steps to understand what happened," I wrote. "I appreciate your apology, and I can see that it comes from genuine reflection rather than just a desire to smooth things over. I'm willing to try rebuilding our relationship, but I need us to start slowly and with clear boundaries. I would like to suggest we begin with a phone call once a month, with the understanding that if conversations become critical or hurtful, I will end them immediately. If we can establish a pattern of respectful communication, we can consider spending time together in person." The first phone call was awkward and tentative, both of us feeling our way through this new dynamic. But she kept her word about the criticism, and I found myself able to relax slightly as we talked about neutral topics. My father's garden, her volunteer work at the local animal shelter, books we had both recently read. Over the following months, our conversations gradually became more natural. She asked genuine questions about my business and seemed interested in hearing about my clients' stories. She mentioned that she had started reading more fiction after seeing my story published and was developing an appreciation for creative work she had previously dismissed as impractical. The real test came when she asked if she could visit Portland for a weekend. I agreed, but with strict conditions. She would stay in a hotel, we would have scheduled activities with clear start and end times, and I would have a support system in place in case I needed to create distance. The visit wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. She admired my apartment, met some of my friends without embarrassing me, and even attended a reading at Powell's, where one of my writing class colleagues was sharing her work. Watching my mother listen respectfully to poetry about depression and self-discovery, I saw evidence of the growth she had claimed in her letter. On her last morning in Portland, we had breakfast at a cafe near my apartment. She looked across the table at me and said something I had been waiting my entire life to hear. "I want you to know that I see you now. The real you, not the version I had in my head. And I like who you are. I'm proud of what you've built. And I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what success actually looks like." That conversation didn't erase 25 years of conditional love and criticism, but it offered something I hadn't expected. The possibility of a different relationship with my mother, one based on who we both actually were, rather than who we thought we were supposed to be. 2 years after my birthday disaster, I celebrated my 27th birthday very differently. David and I hosted a small dinner party at my apartment for 8 close friends, people who knew my story, who had supported me through my transformation, who celebrated my successes and offered comfort during my challenges. My parents were not there, and that was okay. We were still rebuilding our relationship, still learning how to communicate with respect and honesty. But my father had called that morning to wish me happy birthday and to tell me he loved me. My mother had sent a card with a genuine, thoughtful message about how proud she was of my courage in creating an authentic life. As I looked around the table at Sarah, Linda, my writing class friends, David, and several clients who had become genuine friends, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for their presence, but for the journey that had brought me to this point. The girl who had stood frozen in that restaurant 2 years ago, unable to defend herself against a public attack, felt like a different person. I had learned that belonging isn't something you earn through perfect behavior or endless accommodation. It's something you create by being authentic, by sharing your real self with people who appreciate what you have to offer, by building relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The birthday that had shattered my old understanding of family and self-worth had ultimately become the beginning of everything that mattered. Sometimes the worst moments contain the seeds of the best transformations, but only if you're brave enough to plant them and patient enough to tend them as they grow. That night, after everyone had gone home and David and I were cleaning up the kitchen together, He asked me what I was thinking about. I was thinking about how grateful I am, I said, watching him stack plates with the careful attention he brought to everything. Not grateful for what happened at my 25th birthday. That was horrible and traumatic, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But grateful for what I learned about myself afterwards. Grateful for the strength I found, for the people who supported me, for the life I've been able to build. He smiled and pulled me into a hug that smelled like the vanilla candles we had burned during dinner and the faint scent of his cologne. "You know what I think?" he said. "What?" "I think you didn't just survive what happened. You transformed it into something beautiful. You took the worst thing your mother could say about you and proved her wrong, not by changing yourself to fit her expectations, but by becoming so authentically yourself that her opinion became irrelevant." As I drifted off to sleep that night, I thought about the 25-year-old who had planned that birthday party so carefully, hoping to create a perfect evening that would make everyone happy. She couldn't have imagined that the disaster she was walking into would become the best thing that ever happened to her, the catalyst for a life of authenticity, creativity, and genuine connection. Sometimes the most important birthdays aren't the ones that go according to plan.